Look, we need to have a serious conversation about what is happening in the global hangars and why the halls of the Pentagon are feeling a chill that has nothing to do with the air conditioning. As a Canadian who has spent decades looking at the strategic map of our North and the shifting alliances of NATO, I can tell you that we are witnessing a tectonic shift in how air power is defined, and it's all centered around a piece of Swedish engineering that most people underestimate. When Washington talks about airborne threats, they usually point their fingers at Russia's Su-57 or China's J-20, the big, flashy boogeymen of the skies. But according to my observations and the quiet whispers in defense circles, there is one aircraft that Washington monitors with a completely different kind of unease. Now, it's not because this plane is technologically superior in a vacuum, but because it represents something far more dangerous to the American military-industrial complex, a totally different way of thinking about national survival. I am talking about the Saab JAS 39 Gripen. Now, don't get me wrong. Many defense experts will tell you straight to your face that the Gripen can't beat the F-35 in a direct one-on-one air-to-air combat scenario. On paper, that's a fair assessment. But if that's the case, why is the Pentagon so visibly concerned? According to my perspective, the answer lies in the fact that the Gripen isn't even trying to compete with the F-35 on a purely technological level. Instead, it is competing on an entirely different battlefield of economic strategy and defense philosophy. Every time a nation signs a Gripen contract, it isn't just one less American aircraft sold. It's one less nation dependent on the logistical umbilical cord of Washington. It is an ally seeking independence instead of mere protection. This is the story of a silent confrontation between two philosophies of air power, and why this relatively small aircraft from Sweden has become a threat the Pentagon simply cannot ignore. To truly understand why the Gripen troubles the strategic planners in the U.S., you first need to understand what they are not worried about. Washington isn't afraid the Gripen will beat the F-35 in a dogfight. On pure technical merits, the F-35 is objectively superior in most aspects. We are talking better stealth, more advanced sensors, and more sophisticated weapons integration. These are facts that even the Swedes themselves acknowledge in their briefings. So what is the real concern? From where I stand, the Pentagon's worry lies in the very structure of warfare, the economics of long-term conflict, and the shattering of the superweapon logic. The Gripen represents a philosophy of good enough at a much lower cost, which is a direct challenge to the gold-plated doctrine America is building. When a nation chooses the Gripen over the F-35, they are choosing a more independent defense model that is flexible and less controlled by the White House. This takes us back to Sweden's Cold War context, which is something we as Canadians should study closely. Stockholm didn't join NATO for decades. They pursued armed neutrality. That meant if they were attacked, nobody was coming to save them. No American bases, no reinforcements, just themselves. This philosophy shaped the Gripen. Whilst it wasn't built to dominate the skies from massive, luxurious bases with thousands of support engineers. It was designed for the nightmare scenario of a surprise attack, where the major air bases are already smoking craters. This means the infrastructure has collapsed, and everything has to happen fast and dispersed. According to my analysis of Saab's public documents, the Gripen can take off from an 800-meter stretch of ordinary highway. Think about that for a second. Basic maintenance requires just a crew of 6, and most of them can be conscripts with minimal training, completing a turnaround in just 10 minutes. Refueling, rearming, and technical checks can all be done on a back road in the middle of nowhere without complex specialized equipment. This isn't just about air dominance. This is about air survival. But this is exactly the kind of philosophy that makes the Gripen strategically dangerous to the status quo. Now let's talk about the part that makes the budget planners in Ottawa and Washington think twice. According to public reports from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the F-35's cost per flight hour ranges from $35,000 to $47,000. That is a staggering amount of taxpayer money. Even though that number has dropped slightly, it remains astronomical. Meanwhile, the Gripen E, based on data from Saab and operating air forces, has an operating cost of around $8,000 per flight hour. This isn't just a difference in numbers. It is a difference in actual capability. According to my view, with the same budget, a country can fly the Gripen 5 times more than the F-35. This means more training hours for our pilots, more patrol missions over our Arctic waters, and more real combat readiness. Defense analysts often cite a critical metric called the mission readiness rate, the percentage of aircraft ready to fly at any given time. The F-35 has struggled for years, with numbers between 30% and 50%. In contrast, the Gripen maintains a rate of 80% to 90% according to reports from the Swedish and Czech air forces. This implies that an aircraft that can actually fly regularly matters far more than an aircraft that is perfect on paper, but stuck in a hangar waiting for a proprietary software update. But even this isn't the most dangerous part of the equation. The Gripen doesn't try to beat the F-35 with cutting-edge, unproven tech. It wins through smart pragmatism. Take the engine, the General Electric F414. It isn't the most powerful or the most advanced, but it is extremely reliable. A simpler design means fewer breakdowns and easier repairs. When a small air force has to maintain its own fleet without a massive technical team from the manufacturer, reliability becomes more important than peak performance. Regarding sensors and data link systems, the Gripen is fully NATO-compatible, meaning it can share info with the F-35 or F-16. But here's the kicker. The Gripen isn't completely dependent on American systems. Buying nations can integrate their own weapons, radar, and software without needing a green light from Washington. This might sound minor to some, but strategically, it is everything. According to expert assessments, the Gripen's electronic warfare capabilities are extremely advanced, allowing it to jam enemy radar and create false signals. In NATO exercises, the Gripen is often assigned to suppression of enemy air defenses and performs exceptionally well. I recall a Swedish pilot once saying they don't need absolute stealth. They just need enough survivability to get the job done and come home. That is the essence of the Gripen philosophy. What really keeps the Pentagon up at night isn't the plane itself, but how Sweden sells it. When America sells the F-35, it's a traditional arms sale where you depend on Lockheed Martin for everything: software, maintenance, and even usage decisions. Everything runs through American servers. Sweden plays by different rules. Every Gripen contract comes with technology transfer and local industry participation. Look at Brazil. They assemble the Gripen on their own soil. The Czech Republic participates in the supply chain for all of Central Europe. Well, this creates a domino effect that Washington cannot control. Each country that buys a Gripen gets industrial capability and strategic independence. They get the right to decide how to use their weapons without asking for anyone's permission. According to a European defense official, with the F-35, you buy capability, but with the Gripen, you buy freedom. That is exactly what the Pentagon doesn't want to see spreading among allies. Every Gripen contract signed is one less piece on the global chessboard that America fully controls. This puts NATO in a difficult spot because, While the F-35 is the future Washington envisions, the battlefield reality is often different. The Gripen offers independent air power at a much lower cost, making it a far more rational choice for nations with limited budgets who just need enough deterrence. Thus, according to my perspective, true air superiority isn't having 10 F-35s with perfect stealth if only 5 can fly. It's having 20 Gripens with 18 ready for combat at any moment. It is about having the autonomy to develop and deploy your own defense without waiting for an American software upgrade. Recent NATO exercises show that units operating the Gripen typically maintain higher readiness and fly more sorties than F-35 units under the same budget. This isn't about which plane is better on paper. It's about which one can actually fight when the bells toll. Ultimately, the Pentagon fears the Gripen because it represents a future of air power that Washington doesn't own. It proves that you don't need super technology to have an effective air force or spend tens of billions to maintain sovereignty. Hence, it proves that good enough, combined with independence, can matter more than the best with strings attached. This challenges the entire security model America is building. Do allies really need the F-35? Or do they just need the right to self-determination? This is a confrontation between centralizing power and distributing capability. And in that fight, the Gripen is winning on the battlefields of economics, politics, and strategic psychology. The most dangerous weapon isn't always the highest tech. It's the idea that challenges how we think about power itself. The Gripen doesn't threaten the F-35 in the air. It threatens the system the F-35 was built to maintain. In the years ahead, as nations choose between high-cost dependence and low-cost freedom, the answer will reshape the global map. Well, the final question isn't which plane is better, but whether nations will choose absolute superiority with chains or good enough with liberty. The Pentagon knows the answer might not be what they want to hear, and that is exactly why they are worried. This represents a fundamental shift in the global defense landscape that we, especially in Canada, must analyze with a cold, clear eye. According to my personal assessment, we are seeing the end of the era where one superpower can dictate the technical terms of every ally's defense. The Gripen is the first crack in that wall, and it is a crack that is growing wider with every flight hour logged at $8,000. When we look at the strategic depth of a nation like ours, we have to ask if the American model truly fits our rugged geography and our need for independent action in the Arctic. Now, the Swedes have shown that a medium-sized power can punch way above its weight class if it focuses on resilience over flashiness. This implies that the future of air combat might not be found in the stealth coatings of a multi-billion-dollar jet, but in the ability to refuel on a snowy highway in the middle of a blizzard. That is the kind of reality we face in the North, and it is the kind of reality the Gripen was born to dominate. If we ignore these lessons, we do so at our own peril. We are at a crossroads where the cost of entry into the high-tech club might actually be the loss of our strategic soul. According to my view, the Gripen isn't just a plane. It's a warning and a promise at the same time. It warns us against the fragility of overcomplexity and promises that there is a way to be strong without being subservient. Yet this is the conversation the Pentagon wants to avoid, and it is exactly the conversation we need to be having right now in our own defense committees. We need to look at the readiness rates. We need to look at the cost per flight hour. And most importantly, we need to look at who holds the keys to the software. Because at the end of the day, a jet that won't start because a server in Virginia is down is nothing more than a very expensive paperweight. The Gripen's existence is a constant reminder that there is another way, a way that prioritizes the pilot, the mechanic, and the sovereign nation over the corporate bottom line. As we move into an increasingly unstable world, that kind of independence isn't just a luxury, it's a survival trait. This is what the Pentagon understands, and it's why they watch every Saab shipment with such intense scrutiny. They aren't just watching a sale, they are watching the erosion of their monopoly on air power. And for a superpower, that is the most terrifying thing of all. According to my findings, the true power of the Gripen is that it democratizes air defense, making it accessible to those who refuse to play by the rules of the giants. It is a David among Goliaths, not because of its sling, but because of its spirit. And that spirit is what will ultimately define the next century of aerial warfare. We are seeing a shift towards decentralization, where the ability to operate in degraded environments becomes the gold standard. In that world, the F-35 is a delicate instrument, while the Gripen is a Swiss Army knife. For a country like Canada, well, we know which one is more useful when you're 500 miles away from the nearest major city. This is the reality of the North. This is the reality of the Gripen. And this is why the world is watching Sweden with a mix of admiration and fear. According to my final thoughts on this first part of our analysis, the Gripen has already won the battle of ideas. Now, it's just a matter of how many nations have the courage to follow that lead and reclaim their own skies on their own terms. Building on that structural shift we discussed, we need to look deeper into the operational sovereignty that this Swedish marvel provides, especially through the lens of a country like ours that prides itself on being a reliable but independent partner. According to my perspective, the most overlooked value of the Gripen isn't just the low cost or the highway landings. It's the open architecture of the mind. This means that when a nation integrates the Gripen into its fleet, it isn't just buying a weapon system. It is investing in its own intellectual capital. In the Pentagon's model, the F-35 is a locked system, much like a modern smartphone, where you can't even change the battery yourself. But according to my view, the Gripen is the Linux of the skies. It invites you to look under the hood. For a nation like Canada, which possesses a world-class aerospace sector in Quebec and Ontario, this is where the real magic happens. And imagine the strategic advantage of being able to integrate our own homegrown sensors or specialized cold weather search and rescue software without having to wait 3 years for a proprietary update from a contractor in Fort Worth. This isn't just a technical convenience. It is a fundamental pillar of national dignity. According to my findings, when you control the software, you control the mission. This implies that in a crisis, we wouldn't be tethered to a foreign satellite link to authorize a software patch before our jets can engage a specific threat in the high north. We would have the keys to our own house. This is what I call active deterrence, the ability to evolve faster than your adversary can keep up with your manuals. Let's talk about the human element, because that's where the Canadian spirit really aligns with this philosophy. According to my observations, the F-35 requires a temple of maintenance, climate-controlled hangars and specialized floors that cost millions. But the Gripen thrives in the dirt. This means we could distribute our air power across dozens of small, unassuming airfields in the Northwest Territories or Newfoundland. According to my view, this distributed lethality makes it nearly impossible for an aggressor to neutralize our air force in a single strike. You can't target one big base if the entire country is the base. This reflects a gritty, pioneer-like resilience that is baked into the Canadian DNA. We are a people who know how to fix a truck in a blizzard with a wrench and a bit of ingenuity. The Gripen honors that skill set. While it allows our mechanics, our brave men and women in uniform, to be more than just part mounters. It turns them into agile combat support specialists. Furthermore, we must consider the alliance paradox. Many argue that buying the F-35 is the only way to stay interoperable with our neighbors to the south. But according to my analysis, true interoperability isn't about having the exact same toy. It's about having a toy that speaks the same language. The Gripen speaks NATO fluently. It uses the same Link 16, the same munitions, and the same protocols. However, it does so while maintaining a Plan B. According to my perspective, a healthy alliance is made of strong, capable members, not dependent subordinates. By adopting a good enough and ours philosophy, we actually become a more valuable ally to the United States. But we offer a different perspective, a different flight configuration, and a redundant layer of security that is not vulnerable to system software failures that could bring an entire fleet of jet aircraft down. According to my personal assessment, the fear in the Pentagon is actually a fear of a more balanced world. They worry that if the middle powers, the Canadas, the Brazils, the Australias, realize they can defend themselves effectively for 20% of the cost, the monopoly of the superweapon doctrine will vanish. This means the era of diplomacy by procurement is ending. We are moving toward an era of diplomacy by performance. This is a positive development. It encourages innovation, it lowers the barrier to entry for legitimate self-defense, and it forces the big contractors to be more competitive and transparent. And according to my view, the Gripen isn't a threat to Western security, it is a tonic for it. It reminds us that air power is about the pilot's training, the speed of the turnaround, and the political will to stand your ground. This is a message of empowerment. It says that sovereignty isn't something you buy off a shelf in Virginia. It's something you build through smart choices and a refusal to be intimidated by gold-plated hype. When I look at the future of the Canadian North, I don't see a need for a jet that can sneak into a highly defended urban center in another hemisphere. I see a need for a rugged, reliable guardian that can fly 24/7 in the harshest conditions on Earth, managed by Canadians, for Canadians. This means we have the opportunity to redefine what a modern Air Force looks like. But it's not just about the radar cross-section, it's about the economic cross-section. According to my perspective, a nation that isn't broke from buying its planes is a nation that has more money to spend on its people, its healthcare, and its infrastructure. That, in itself, is a form of national defense. A stable, prosperous society is much harder to subvert than one struggling under the weight of an unsustainable defense budget. In conclusion, according to my vision, the Swedish lesson is a gift to the world. It proves that small to medium nations can be masters of their own destiny. It proves that intelligence beats brute force and that flexibility beats complexity. This is a moment for pride, not for unease. We should be inspired by the idea that there is a path to security that doesn't involve surrendering our autonomy. And according to my final thoughts, the Pentagon's worry is the ultimate complement to the Gripen's success. It is a signal to the rest of us that the underdog has finally found a way to level the playing field. And as a Canadian, I can't think of anything more exciting than a level playing field where our talent and our grit can finally shine through. The future of the sky is not just an image. It is intelligent, independent, and ultimately in our hands. Would you like me to develop a comparative table between the F-35 and Gripen specifically tailored for Canadian Arctic operational requirements?